Hello, and welcome to this week's Learning Spaces webinar. Last Page Standing, your guide to great glossary building. I'm Deborah Jones, your webinar host. I hope everyone's having a beautiful morning. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right in. By the end of the webinar, you'll be able to answer 3 questions. 1. What is the purpose of a glossary? Or in other words, how can a glossary contribute to my course? 2. How do I build a glossary from scratch? And 3. How do I apply best practice to corporate and the K-20 audiences? Now that you have an idea of where we're going, hey, let's get this party started. At the end of a boxing match, there's one man or woman standing. At the end of a championship game, you can expect that there's one team standing. And at the end of your favorite reality TV contest, you can expect one contestant, one duet, one group to be standing. And as always, at the end of an education text, you can always expect one group of pages to be standing, the glossary. An effective glossary is much like the career of TV contestant winners. I bet you're asking, what do I mean? Well, first, a glossary can be both the end and the beginning. Once a contestant wins, they have reached the end of the contest. However, their career in the limelight has just begun. Throughout their career, they, the media, and the public will always refer back to their time as a contestant. That time will be revisited, and as time passes and knowledge grows, the perspective of that time will change. Similarly, though the glossary is often placed at the end of a text or lesson, a glossary can serve as a reference that supports learners as they take what they've learned and transfer the learning and information to future experiences in the classroom or workplace. And just like the winner, the glossary can be revisited and revised as the learner's knowledge grows. The second thing a glossary shares with the contest winner is the process. The contribution of a glossary can grow beyond that of a reference material. Like the contestant, the glossary can be a big part of the process, and actually a vital part of the process. The learning process, that is. Thankfully, technology has afforded the capability of elevating the glossary from just a stagnant group of pages that students refer to as their hunting and pecking for answers, to being able to have the versatility to operate as an activity, an assignment, and or assessment. In other words, the glossary can be the answers. In section 3, we will discuss this further. Lastly, like winning a TV reality contest, the glossary can bring clarity. Oftentimes, contestants have quit their good corporate jobs or dropped out of college on their way to their medical degree or their third year of law school to chase their dreams, at usually the dismay of their family and friends and colleagues who are thinking, oh my gosh, what are you doing? But winning the contest can provide them with reassurance of their choice and their path in life. While on the other hand, losing may cause them to reevaluate. Similarly, especially if the glossary is used as a part of the learning process, A glossary can correct learners' understanding of a concept or reassure them. In all, a glossary contributes very much to the lesson and is versatile enough to contribute in a variety of key ways. So let's recap some key points. One, the glossary can be both the end and the beginning of a learning experience. It is a reference tool that the learner carries with them, like a contestant carries their title as an American Idol, America's Best Dance Crew, or Chop Champion. And more importantly, it serves like the lessons that they learned while they were earning their title, something to always be mindful of. Two, like the contest itself, the glossary can be a part of the learning process. Again, instead of just serving as a place where they go to hunt and peck to fill in the answers on their worksheet or to research the answers to their quiz, the glossary can be the answer. It's like the contest in that it can serve as an effective learning experience for both individuals and groups. And lastly, it can provide clarity, like being named the American Idol, America's Best Dance Crew, or Chop Champion. Final glossary entries should be clear cut and provide learners with clarity, correction, and reassurance. Now, let's answer question number two. How can you build a glossary from scratch? In this demonstration, next is going to be the demonstration. So if you don't have one already, now will be a good time to grab something to write on or and write with. Jotting down each step will help you to remember how to build a glossary in the future. It can also you can pin your notes somewhere for close quick reference. This video will also be uploaded in onto YouTube to serve as a quick digital reference so you can always refer and see the steps as you're doing them. If you would like that URL, please leave your email in the comments. I suggest bookmarking the URL YouTube page until you become comfortable. Lastly, this demo will cover the basics of building a glossary. We will discuss further applications in the final section. Ready? Let's begin. In the final section, we will discuss application differences across corporate and K-20 courses. First, it is important to know three key differences between the two audiences. One, their learning objectives. Two, the way they measure success. And three, learners' motivations. I've created a chart to help you to identify those differences more specifically. First, in the corporate setting, learning objectives is to bridge performance gaps. Gaps such as increasing policy adherence or employee engagement. Success is also often measured by business analytics, like a decrease in shrinkage and employee turnovers. And lastly, learners are motivated by advancement and stability. Or, in other words, questions like, how can I get promoted? Or, how is this class going to help me keep my job? On the other hand, in the K-20 environment, the object is to increase competency. That is, to add to learners' overall knowledge base. Hopefully, adding to it in a way that will help them to reach their goals and aspirations after after the course is completed and after college is done. Success in the K-20 setting is measured by two audiences. First, students want to get good grades. Oftentimes, this is their sole purpose in attending class and receiving the information that's being disseminated. But also, you have the second audience, the instructors and the administration, who is very important to them, not only that the students learn, but also that they are meeting program standards, especially in competency-based education. They have to have answers to how they know that their students are competent in meeting the objectives that are outlined in their course syllabi and program expectations. Lastly, these two groups are motivated by two. Also, you have to keep in mind that there are two motivations at play in the K through 20 setting. So students are asking questions like, what will be on the test? What does our instructor want? While on the other hand, as mentioned, instructors and administration are asking, how do we show that our students are learning, that they can meet competencies, and that also this is a program that other students will benefit from attending? The irony here is that the difference between corporate and K through 20 audiences often don't require different glossary settings. Really, it is a matter of understanding the different uses of the glossary settings. Let me first start by noting that when the glossary is being used as part of the learning process, that is, being used as an assignment or an assessment or an activity, that all entry settings for both K through 20 and corporate should be set to yes. Let me give you an example. So, individuals in the corporate setting or small groups in the K through 20 settings could be assigned concepts to contribute to the building of the glossary. So, during the learning experience, it is important that learners can submit, edit, and make comments freely. Even duplicates should be allowed to incite discussion about the similarity and differences and applications of each of the definitions. Other individuals or groups and instructors can use the ratings and comment settings to peer review and provide feedback. The, this is just one example of how the settings can or why the settings should be on yes while used during the learning experience. You really want the learning to be open and an exploratory experience so that learners, whether in corporate or in K through 27 in K through 20 settings, can have an opportunity again to explore and take ownership of their learning. Also, neurologically speaking, it will serve a good purpose because When a person gets an answer wrong, they are more likely to remember the correct answer or the discussion surrounding the correct answer at the neurological level. So, in this way, it shows the importance of creating an exploratory and free atmosphere for the learners to contribute to the glossary. On the other hand, when we're talking about using the glossary differently, it's more pertinent regarding the final product. That is the end result that is going to serve as that reference material, that end and that beginning, that clarity. That is where the differences in the uses of the glossary come. So, for instance, duplicate entries in the corporate environment should never be allowed. In the corporate environment, the glossary serves as a repository for policies and procedures, and therefore they should be kept clear and concise as possible. Duplicate entries run the risk of interference. On the other hand, duplicate entries in the K20 environment should be allowed to keep ongoing discussion. For example, throughout the course, students could be allowed to or maybe required to challenge the definitions that are already submitted into the glossary. In this way, both the author and the challenger could then be required to defend the definition that they entered. And so, in this way, both students will deepen their learning throughout the course because they have to then go find supplemental evidence in the same way that a debate class will enrich their knowledge surrounding a different the topic at hand. Another setting will be the comment setting. In both environments, the K through 12 and corporate, comments should be allowed. However, in the corporate environment, comments should be allowed and employees should be encouraged to use them for clarity and to voice concerns as business needs change. In the K through 20 setting, students can be encouraged or again even required to update their concept as their knowledge base expands. For example, in the beginning of our learning experiences about the body, we learn that the cell is the smallest living thing. But by the time we've taken a more advanced physiology class, then we have learned a lot more about the cell than its base definition. And so, in this way, students can be required or encouraged to expand their definitions, in turn, creating a track record, if you will, of their learning growth. Next, the rating section. In the corporate environment, the rating setting can allow employees to express concerns and rate level of effectiveness as business change. Oftentimes, it is the frontline workers that are the most knowledgeable about the effectiveness of a policy change or a procedure change. And so, in this way, supervisors can have a quantitative feedback as well as real time feedback. In combination with the comments, a person, an employee, can rate the policy or procedure in the glossary and then offer the example that supports maybe an example that they just experienced with a client or customer And so, in this way, supervisors again have real time feedback and a quantitative measure to be able to analyze both this quantitative and qualitative measurement of effectiveness and making it an easier process of adjustment. On the other hand, in the K through 20 environment, the comment or the ratings feature should also be allowed. Students should be encouraged to use the ratings feature, most importantly for peer reviews. Similar to what's commonly found in English classes with rough draft papers, this activity can offer a chance for correction before submitting for the final grade. Because, all in all, we as the instructors are less concerned with the grade they get because it's simply a measurement of their understanding than we are with being sure that they've understood. And so that's why a lot of times during in English classes, there are these peer review periods because we want them to get a good grade. Not to mention, it helps us out in the end when we're reading final papers that have been peer reviewed and have less grammatical errors and punctuation errors and adhere to the format in the way that we have taught. The last setting will be the display type. In the corporate environment, the frequently asked questions style can be used to provide employees with help making judgments on uncommon situations or simply provide clarity and support after a procedure update. For instance, as mentioned, if you have the frequently asked question style, then when an uncommon situation comes about, then the employee can look at the frequently asked questions and turn to their peers for support. This in turn saves the supervisors time in answering questions that can be answered in the glossary. It'll also help in both in supervisors and employers and employees to save time because it can be updated as new situations occur. That way, the situation doesn't have to occur several times before they realize it's an issue. The example that comes to mind is the latest Samsung 7 issue with the phones. If they had a frequently asked question glossary, then they would be able to see that these customer service representatives are getting very frequent calls about the phones getting hot and exploding before they have medical expenses or other advanced repercussions. On the other hand, in the K through 20 environment, the encyclopedia display can help learners by providing them a summation of the concept and also providing them an understanding of how the concept relates to other terms. Again, going back to the cell example, as they expand their knowledge from, say, a brain cell just being the smallest living thing, they can then see the encyclopedia version that explains how the neurons are communication devices that actually guide all of our behaviors, thoughts, and feelings, and how then the synapses as well as the parts of the cell work together. Also, adding the key words will then help the students to assess the additional information about synapses and parts of the cells in turn creating this learning, this interactive and interrelated learning experience as opposed to one that is compartmentalized. So let's recap. First, we've talked about three key differences between application in the corporate environment and the K through 20 environment. Note that this list is not all inclusive. Depending on your environment will determine what other key differences they are. One other that comes to my mind right now is the difference in time and how their days are set up. Oftentimes, uh, corporate employees are in and out of meetings all day. They might also be mobile. And in that way, sound, for instance, may not be the best use in best used in e-learning if they don't have uh, a place where they can hear it or that it would be safe to use it. On the other hand, in K through 20, students are often in one place for an extended amount of time, whether that's in college where they're in one class for an hour and 15 minutes, or in grade school where they're in the same classroom all day. So this is also another key difference, and it's important to remember actually our second key point, which is to always use the needs of your learners to guide the building of your glossary. Because again, the needs of your learners are determined on each, or not limited rather, or only limited by the different environments and objectives that need to be met. So each person in attendance here will have a different set of needs that needs to be met, and the glossary is it's important to use the glossary to meet those needs. Which brings me to the last key point is that these are not these are not rules that are absolutes. They're just guidelines and suggestions um, across the on a very superficial level. We just went across we just breezed the surface, if you will, of how to utilize different settings. Of course, there are many other different settings that we didn't mention and more advanced settings. And so, again, these are just guidelines. There are always exceptions to the rules, and your learners are, and their needs are what should guide your building of your glossary. Last but certainly not least, after this webinar is over, I would strongly suggest taking a few moments to just think and reflect. To jot down three things that you've learned throughout this webinar. And then three ways that you could use this learning and apply them to your work. That way, you haven't just spent 30 minutes listening to me disseminate information, but now you'll have an action plan. Thanks again for attending. Hope we see you next week.